The chill settled deep in Sarah's bones, a constant companion since she'd crossed the threshold of the old Victorian. It wasn't the chill of a drafty house, though the place had its share of those. This was different, a cold that seemed to emanate from the very walls, seeping into her like a persistent fog. The house stood on a quiet street in the small town of Havenwood, Maine, a relic of a bygone era with its gables and ornate woodwork now faded and worn. Sarah had been drawn to its melancholic charm, seeking a fresh start after a difficult period in her life. But from the moment she unpacked her first box, she felt a presence, an unseen observer that watched her every move. It manifested in subtle ways, a whisper of wind where there were no open windows, a fleeting shadow at the periphery of her vision, the unsettling feeling of being watched when she knew she was alone. The house held secrets. She could feel it. Secrets that stirred in the quiet corners and echoed in the long, empty hallways. It was a feeling that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end, a constant reminder that she was not alone. That unsettling feeling, that constant awareness of an unseen presence grew stronger with each passing day. Sarah began to research the history of the house, hoping to find a logical explanation for the strange occurrences. Local records revealed a tragic event. A young woman named Emily Carter had been murdered within its walls 10 years prior. The case had never been solved, a dark stain on the town's otherwise peaceful history. Emily, it seemed, had been a beloved member of the community, known for her kindness and vibrant spirit. The details of her death were gruesome, a brutal act of violence that had shocked Havenwood to its core. As Sarah delved deeper into the old newspaper articles and police reports, a sense of unease settled over her. The house's coldness seemed to intensify, and the subtle phenomena escalated. Doors creaked open and shut on their own. Objects shifted positions overnight, and Sarah would often hear faint whispers, too indistinct to decipher, seeming to emanate from within the walls themselves. One evening, while reading through a particularly chilling account of the murder, a framed photograph on the mantelpiece suddenly fell to the floor, the glass shattering into 1,000 pieces. It was a picture of a young woman with bright, smiling eyes, Emily Carter. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine, a chilling certainty that she was no longer alone in the house, that Emily's presence lingered, trapped within its walls, desperately trying to communicate. The shattered glass of Emily's photograph seemed to mark a turning point. The subtle disturbances escalated into more tangible events. Sarah began experiencing vivid, fragmented visions, flashes of a struggle, a shadowy figure, a look of terror in a young woman's eyes. These visions were fleeting, like broken pieces of a nightmare, but they left her shaken and disturbed. Driven by a growing sense of unease and a desire to understand what was happening, Sarah sought out Mr. Thompson, the local historian. He was an elderly gentleman with a wealth of knowledge about Havenwood's past, and she hoped he could shed some light on the Carter case. Mr. Thompson confirmed the details of the tragic story, his voice heavy with sadness as he recounted the events of that fateful night. He also spoke of rumors that had circulated after the murder, whispers of strange occurrences in the house, but dismissed them as local gossip. However, he advised Sarah to be cautious, acknowledging the house's unsettling history. As Sarah shared her experiences, a flicker of concern crossed his face. Back at the house, Sarah found herself increasingly isolated. Her friends and family, concerned by her increasingly erratic behavior and stories of ghostly encounters, began to distance themselves. They attributed her experiences to stress and exhaustion, suggesting she see a therapist. This isolation only intensified her fear, making her feel more vulnerable and alone in the presence of the unseen force that shared her home. The isolation deepened, but Sarah found a strange sort of companionship in the growing presence of Emily. The paranormal activity intensified, becoming less random and more directed. It was as if Emily was trying to communicate, to guide Sarah towards something. One night, while lying in bed, Sarah felt an icy draft sweep through the room, even though the windows were tightly closed. A faint whisper echoed in the air, barely audible, but Sarah distinctly heard a name. David. The name meant nothing to her at first, but it lingered in her mind, a persistent echo. Another time, while looking in the bathroom mirror, she noticed words slowly appearing on the fogged surface, behind the bookcase. The message vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving Sarah breathless with a mixture of fear and excitement. She rushed to the living room and examined the large antique bookcase. Pushing against it, she discovered it was hinged, revealing a hidden compartment behind it. Inside, she found a small wooden box. Her hands trembling, she opened it. Inside lay a tarnished silver locket and a folded piece of paper. The paper was a handwritten letter dated just days before Emily's death. It was addressed to David, and it spoke of a secret love, a forbidden romance. The letter hinted at a disagreement, a quarrel fueled by jealousy. As Sarah read the letter, a vivid image flashed through her mind. Emily arguing with a man, his face obscured by shadows, but his voice filled with rage. The locket, she realized, must have belonged to him. It was becoming clear. Emily wasn't just present. She was actively trying to reveal the truth, to point a finger at her killer. The letter and the locket were tangible proof, a connection to the past that Sarah could no longer ignore. She took the items to Mr. Thompson, hoping he could identify the David mentioned in the letter. After careful examination of the locket, he recognized it as belonging to David Miller, a young man who had been a close friend of Emily's. He explained that David had left Havenwood shortly after Emily's death, a departure that had raised some eyebrows at the time. The police had questioned him, but with no concrete evidence, he was never considered a prime suspect. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. David Miller still lived in Havenwood. She found his address in the local phone book and drove to his house, a modest bungalow on the outskirts of town. As she sat in her car watching the house, she felt a wave of fear wash over her. This was no longer just a historical mystery. It was a real, present danger. She was confronting a potential killer. Back at the Victorian, the activity intensified. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew heavy with a palpable sense of dread. Sarah felt Emily's presence more strongly than ever, a desperate plea for justice resonating through the house. She began having more complete visions, fragments of the night of the murder piecing themselves together like a macabre puzzle. She saw David arguing with Emily in the living room, his face contorted with rage. She saw him grab her, a struggle ensuing, and then darkness. The visions were accompanied by a distinct smell of old spice, a scent that Sarah had never noticed before in the house. She realized it was the same scent she had briefly caught a whiff of outside David Miller's house. The connection was undeniable. Emily was guiding her, providing her with the clues she needed to expose the truth. The fear Sarah felt was now intertwined with a fierce determination. She had to help Emily find peace, to bring her killer to justice. The weight of this responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders, but she knew she couldn't turn back. Armed with the knowledge gleaned from Emily's spectral guidance, Sarah decided to confront David Miller. She knew it was a dangerous move, but she felt she had no other choice. The police had failed Emily 10 years ago. It was up to her to see justice done. She called David and arranged to meet him at the Victorian under the pretense of discussing the house's history. As he stepped into the living room, Sarah noticed the faint scent of old spice clinging to him. confirming her suspicions. The air in the room grew cold, and shadows danced in the corners. Sarah could feel Emily's presence, a palpable wave of anger and fear emanating from the walls. Sarah began to recount the events of the night of Emily's murder, using the details she had seen in her visions. David's demeanor shifted. He became agitated, his eyes darting nervously around the room. As Sarah described the argument, the struggle, the darkness, David's composure crumbled. Objects began to move on their own. A book flew off the shelf. A lamp flickered violently, and the temperature dropped dramatically. David's face paled, and he began to tremble. He looked around the room, as if he could see Emily standing there, accusing him. The spectral activity intensified, reaching a fever pitch. A chilling whisper echoed through the room, Emily's voice clear and distinct. "You did this, David." Overwhelmed by the supernatural display and the weight of his guilt, David finally broke down. David's confession was a torrent of guilt and regret. He admitted to arguing with Emily that night, fueled by jealousy and a desperate desire to keep her from leaving him. He confessed to the struggle, the accidental blow that had taken her life, and the panicked cover-up that followed. He had buried the locket, hoping it would never be found, and had fled Havenwood only to return years later, haunted by his crime. As he spoke, the spectral activity subsided. The temperature in the room began to normalize, and the shadows retreated. It was as if Emily, having finally heard his confession, was finding a measure of peace. Sarah, though shaken by the intensity of the experience, felt a sense of relief. She immediately called the police, who arrived to take David into custody. The long unsolved case was finally closed. The news spread quickly through Havenwood, bringing a sense of closure to the community that had mourned Emily's loss for so long. Her family, finally knowing the truth, could begin to heal. Back at the Victorian, a profound sense of calm settled over the house. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by a quiet serenity. Sarah felt a distinct shift in Emily's presence. No longer a tormented spirit seeking vengeance, but a peaceful presence, finally at rest. The feeling of being watched was still there, but it was no longer menacing. It was a gentle, almost protective presence. The house felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from its foundations. The air was clean, and the chill that had permeated the walls was gone. The days that followed were filled with a sense of quiet resolution. The town of Havenwood breathed a collective sigh of relief. Emily's name was cleared, and the truth of her tragic fate was finally brought to light. The Victorian, once a place of fear and unease, now felt different. The oppressive atmosphere had completely dissipated, replaced by a sense of tranquility. Sarah found herself able to relax in the house for the first time since she had moved in. The feeling of being watched persisted, but it was no longer a source of fear. It was more like a gentle presence, a comforting reminder that she was not alone. Sometimes she would catch a fleeting glimpse of a shadow in the corner of her eye, or feel a sudden gentle breeze when all the windows were closed. These occurrences no longer frightened her. They felt like a quiet acknowledgement, a subtle sign that Emily's spirit was still present, watching over her. It was a peaceful presence, a guardian angel rather than a vengeful ghost. The house, once a symbol of tragedy, had become a sanctuary, a place where justice had finally been served. Sarah decided to stay in the Victorian. It was no longer a house of horrors, but a home filled with a quiet, lingering peace. She had come to Havenwood seeking a fresh start, and she had found it, though not in the way she had expected. She had faced her fears, confronted the supernatural, and played a crucial role in bringing justice to a long-forgotten victim. The experience had changed her, strengthening her belief in the power of justice and the enduring nature of the human spirit. Sometimes, when the wind howled outside and the old house creaked and groaned, Sarah would stand by the window, looking out at the quiet street. She would feel a gentle breeze brush against her cheek, a subtle reminder of Emily's presence. It was a comforting sensation, a whisper from the past, assuring her that she was not alone. The echoes of the past remained, not as terrifying specters, but as gentle reminders of the power of truth and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The Victorian, once a symbol of tragedy, now stood as a testament to the resilience of the human heart and the enduring power of justice, a place where a silent avenger had finally found peace.